My name is Rosa McQueen. I am the Secretary of the RGU TV Society, and today I'm joined by the Aberdeen South and Northern Carling candidate for the SNP, Audrey Nicoll. We'll start off with an easy one. So the SNP has been in power for 3 parliamentary terms now. If you were to win a 4th election this time round, what would your priorities be?
Well, I think within the context of national priorities, obviously the priority is recovery from COVID, both in the sense of our public health recovery and also our economic recovery. And I see those two very much moving forward hand in hand. So I think they've got to really work in tandem with each other. And I'm really quite confident that we have the kind of manifesto and we've got the support behind us to make that happen in the next 5 years.
Okay. And one thing that's obviously going to be on everyone's minds going into this election is climate change. Scientists say that we only have 9 years left to reverse some of the major effects of climate change. So what is the SNP doing to meet climate targets and address the climate crisis?
Well, I think there's a whole range of manifesto commitments, first of all, that have come out around climate change, and that really sits right across communities. So it begins in our homes with each of us taking some responsibility in respect of the way we live, the way we work, the way we behave, and then moving that up through into neighbourhoods and communities. And, I've seen, for example, locally, lots and lots of things like community cleanups have started to emerge across the city of Aberdeen, and that's no less the case in my constituency. So I think the messages that the SNP have put together over the last sort of 5 years or so are beginning to really hit home. And if nothing else, during the pandemic, we've had maybe a little bit of time to really think about that. Certainly at government level, if you look at the manifesto, there's a whole range of commitments that really have climate change and meeting our net zero targets at their heart. But they cut across a range of different things, from transport, from the way we live, from promoting a circular economy, from moving from fossil fueled based heating, for example, in our homes, to renewables. And then, of course, in the Northeast, which is where we are, the Scottish Government has already committed £62 million towards that journey towards net zero. And we're already beginning to see some of that being used in developments in the Northeast. So I think going forward, the SNP will very much be looking for sort of climate change practice, if you like, and behaviour right across the spectrum, from starting in our homes right through to industry, to government, and really beyond.
And something that was affected quite badly by the pandemic, and something that Nicola Sturgeon addressed as one of her key priorities going into the last election in 2016 was education. And she appointed John Swinney, a former leader of the SNP, as the Education Secretary. And in that previous term of Parliament, there was an education bill which didn't get passed, and exams failure, which seemed to be predicted months in advance. Do you think John Swinney should have lost his job over that?
I have got the highest regard for John Swinney. I would absolutely endorse what he's done to take education at all levels forward over the last 5 years. I think where we found ourselves with the exam situation was really, I suppose, the sort of culmination or the outcome of a number of different sort of scenarios and situations that arose. So there were a lot of moving parts there. And I think at the time, the decision making that was made around what happened with the exams was absolutely made in good faith. And at the end of the day, John Swinney took a decision and reversed the recommendations that had been made. And I think that was absolutely the right thing to do. I think, he would have been open to criticism if he hadn't done that. He listened to what people said. He had been following the advice he'd been given. And, at the end of the day, the outcome I think it was a good outcome, given the circumstances that we found ourselves in at that time.
In 2016's manifesto, the SNP promised consultation and reform to the Gender Recognition Act, which would allow trans people more easily to identify with the gender identity that they have. In 2020, that bill was put on the shelf due to the coronavirus pandemic and hasn't been revisited. And now the SNP's manifesto has a watered down version of what was in the 2016 manifesto. And also a few nights ago, I believe it was last night, Nicola Sturgeon challenged Boris Johnson to scrap conversion therapy before she did. But that's a power that she could just do already, considering Stormont, the Northern Irish Assembly, proved that they could by voting on that last night to scrap conversion therapy. Does the SNP have an issue with LGBT people?
Well, I would say absolutely not. I think it's been clear throughout the time that the SNP have been in government. If anything, I think they've probably been one of the sort of strongest voices amongst the political parties that have promoted and secured rights for the LGBTI community. I don't think there's really much doubt about that. I think in a party as big as the SNP, you're always going to get somebody who finds that their views are at odds or end up becoming at odds with the sort of party position on anything, and that's not just around LGBT rights. And I think we have to just be grown up and accept that. I think in terms of, the way in which the SNP has worked to improve and protect LGBT rights, I think you've just got to look at many of the policies that the SNP have developed and progressed across the years. And really, what a lot of policy finds itself is it's underpinned by equality and that sort of principle of equity and equality for all, and basing policy on human rights and underpinning where we are with human rights. So I think that in terms of LGBT and the Gender Recognition Act, it's disappointing that the bill was put on hold for sure, because it was an important piece of, it was an important legislative journey through the Scottish Parliament. But on a personal level, I feel that the issue is quite complex and it's quite sensitive, it's quite nuanced, and I would rather that it came back to the next parliamentary session for the scrutiny that I think it requires, because this isn't just a single issue. This is about human rights. It's about it's about hate crime and so on. So I think really to stand up to scrutiny, there needs to be it needs to be brought back and properly debated and taken through the Scottish Parliament in the way that it deserves to be. And I think the final point I would make is, this isn't just an SNP issue. This is a global issue, and it's one that you know, I think that we need to be mature and we need to be quite responsible around, you know, other countries have debated gender recognition, and they have worked around trans rights and eliminating transphobia. So I would like us to have that mature adult debate here in Scotland as well, and show that we are actually quite a contemporary nation when it comes to tackling some of the more sensitive and complex issues that are actually really quite important in society.
Okay. And speaking of something that's very important for Scotland, the prospect of another independence referendum being held in the next 5 years. Obviously, it's in the SNP's manifesto as well as other parties. And if Parliament is going to be a pro-independence Parliament, which it looks like it's going to be based on current polling, on the 7th of May, if Nicola Sturgeon asks Boris Johnson for another referendum with the mandate of the majority pro-Indy MSPs, and he decides no, what is the next step?
Well, I think if he decides no, then that's really reflecting the Tory party to be completely anti-democratic. You know, that would be completely at odds with the will of the Scottish people. And so, you know, it would be for the Scottish Parliament to decide what the next steps were. So I wouldn't be able to predict what that might be, because there are obviously different options. I think the one thing at the moment is what the SNP would want to do is to make sure that the next steps towards a referendum were legitimate, that they were legal, that they were based in a legislative, that they were underpinned by a legislative baseline. And because that's where, you know, that's where we've always really been with this whole debate, and we've not really wavered from that. And I personally wouldn't want us to do that. I don't think we need to, but I certainly would be disappointed if, maybe not surprised, if the Prime Minister did turn round and say, well, no, sorry, you can't have your referendum. I think that would be showing that we aren't living in a democracy, that the will of the people is ignored, and it would be seen for what it was, anti-democratic.
Okay. Audrey Nicoll, thank you very much.
Thank you.